Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim Smith, and I am a program coordinator for OneOp. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Balancing Military Spouse Employment with Family Economic Well-Being. This webinar is the second of our 2024 Military Family Readiness Academy series on economic readiness and military family well-being. The Academy includes a three-part webinar series as well as a self-paced course. We hope you'll join us for several MFRA events. You can explore more about the course, webinars, and much more by visiting the link that has been shared in the chat pod. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully, you are currently able to view the slides we're sharing. If you are unable to see them or have any other difficulties, please email us at contact@oneop.org for tech support. We look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversation and questions. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversation, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You will then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. From there, just click the chat bubble icon. When typing questions or comments, please be sure to select everyone from the response options drop-down menu so everyone is able to view them in the chat pod. We will have a few minutes at the end of today's presentation to answer questions, so please ask your questions in the chat pod. Please note that the slides and resources are available for download on the event page for today's session. We will be covering continuing education information at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned toward the end if you're interested in continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. Finally, closed captioning is available for this webinar. You can turn on the subtitles via the Zoom toolbar. Thank you for joining us as we continue our partnership with the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to expand the readiness, knowledge, and networks of the professionals supporting our military service members and their families. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Kayla Reed-Fitzke, who will be our chat moderator. Dr. Fitzke is the Spouse Employment Principal Investigator at OneOp. She also serves as Program Director and Professional Development Coordinator for the Medical Family Therapy Doctoral Program at East Carolina University. Her work focuses on identifying ways to promote the well-being of military service members and their families, particularly at the start of service. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Fitzke, and I will now turn it over to you to begin our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to everyone who is taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First, we are thrilled to have Eddie Mincer as one of our presenters today. Eddie has over 27 years of personal and professional experience in supporting military families through a variety of roles across the Department of Defense and federal government. In his role as Associate Director of the DoD's Office of Military Family Readiness Policy, he is responsible for management of the family readiness and well-being policies and programs. Eddie leads a team focused on easing the impact of challenges faced by military families because of the often unpredictable and mobile nature of military life. We are also honored to have Josie Beets with us today. She is the program manager for Spouse Education and Career Opportunities Program, supporting and empowering more than 1.1 million military spouses through career exploration, education, training, and employer connections. In this role, she also develops a variety of programs, services, and trainings that are responsive to the needs of service members and their families. She has 15 years of experience serving communities through the nonprofit and public sectors, mostly serving military families. Thank you to both of you for sharing your expertise with us today. As many of you likely are aware, military family members are an integral part of the service member support system. Unfortunately, many of the challenges that military spouses face in maintaining employment are often overlooked. Today, we'd like to have a conversation about the ways in which the Department of Defense endeavor to positively influence the career trajectories of military spouses, contributing to their family's economic stability and overall well-being. Specifically, we're going to talk about the unique challenges that military spouses face in balancing employment, responsibilities with the demands of military life, including frequent relocations and deployments, and how these challenges can affect family well-being. We'll also discuss what the Department of Defense has implemented to address the barriers around military spouse employment in support of military readiness and retention. By the end of this webinar, our goal is for you to have an understanding of the link between military family systems of support and their economic well-being. In the Military Family Readiness Academy, we're using a case story about the Howard family. This includes Joseph, who's the service member, Margaret, who's a military spouse and teacher, and their daughter, Maya, who's 2 years old and has a developmental disability. And we're using this case story to help illustrate some of the ways that service providers can use programs and services across the military family readiness system to support families. Again, you can read the entire case story on our website from the link shared in the chat pod. Today, we'll be covering a small section of the story. So Joseph has received PCS orders and they have recently moved, and Margaret needs to find a new job in a new state. She's excited about this opportunity in finding employment and building a new community, but she needs some support in transitioning her credentials. She has talked with the EF&P team at their new duty station and scheduled an evaluation for her daughter to get connected to education services and resources. They have been placed on a childcare waiting list, so don't have childcare set up quite yet. Margaret has been extremely stressed about being in a new area and the reality of the upcoming physical absence of Joseph for deployment. So based on our discussion today, we invite you to think about your own experiences working with families and how you might support the Howard family in this situation. Some of the questions that we'll consider include, what does Margaret do? What are some unforeseen circumstances that she might experience? Who does she reach out to for her specific skill set? And what supports are available to her during this transition? So to get us started today, I want to ask what seems like maybe a simple question. So first, can we talk about who is the military spouse?
I'm going to take that one, Kayla. Thank you so much. It's so good to be with all of you this morning. You know, Margaret's story is a pretty universal story, and at the same time, every one of our military spouses brings a very different perspective to their spouse and military family experience. And so we have approximately 1 million military spouses across the active duty, reserve, and National Guard components. They tend to be female, although we are seeing that number decrease as we have more male military spouses. And let me take a step back. Who are military spouses? Eddie Menser and I are military spouses. Eddie recently became a veteran spouse, as I'm sure he'll tell us about. But I'm an active duty Army spouse. And so it's really great to be able to serve this community, which is my community. It is very diverse. You know, the diversity of our military, it reflects the diversity of our nation and is in many ways more diverse than our nation. And the spouses who are part of the military community reflect that as well. The average age of our military spouses is actually 32, which is a little bit older than some folks sometimes jump to conclusions about. But when we think it through, it kind of makes sense. You know, our service members who come in when they're 18, 19 years old don't necessarily come in with a family at that point in time. They collect military spouses along the way, so to speak. Like I like to say, military spouses are a renewable resource. We always have new ones coming in and joining us. And so there's always a great opportunity and challenge there to reach them. 69% have children under the age of 18. And so obviously childcare and caregiving duties are going to be something that is important to this community. 76% of military families live off the installation. This is a really important point for us, and one of the reasons that our program is set up the way it is. We have fantastic resources available on installations. However, families sometimes don't live co-located with those locations. Our military spouse population is highly educated. They trend to have more and higher degrees than civilian populations in the same age cohort. And spouses face a 21% unemployment rate. I don't need to tell anyone that that is higher than any of us want it to be. And that number has pretty much remained statistically unchanged. It's been between 25 and 21% since, I want to say 2015. So, something we definitely all have to consider as we're talking about spouse employment. And unemployed spouses face 19 weeks. That's pretty much an average, looking for work after every PCS, after every military move. This is who our military spouse cohort is.
Hey, thank you, Josie. Yeah, that's a really high unemployment rate. I'm sure that would be shocking for some who aren't aware that the rate is that high. So, why is it important to talk about military spouse employment, particularly in the context of economic readiness and military family well-being?
Hey, Kayla, I'm going to go ahead and take that one. And first off, I just want to say a huge thank you to the OneOp team, to Kayla, to Kim, to all of us that have come together to talk about these challenges. And across the MFRA, most importantly, a huge thanks to all of you that are out there in the field, service providers in so many different roles. It was so awesome to see in the chat, not only that, we have the diversity of regions and locations. We've got people from Europe, we've got people from Asia, all over the United States, but also the different roles. I saw an MFLEC up there, military and family life counselor. I saw family advocacy. I saw higher academia. All of these folks that are looking at these challenges faced by our families. And I think that anybody that works with military families, when we look at that profile, that spouse profile of the Howards, we know that family. Their name may not be Howard, but we know who they are. We see them all the time in the work that we do. So it's so great. And David Evans, thank you for chiming in there. Having the USAA Educational Foundation, one of our military serving organizations that are supporting military families. It's just great to see such diversity in our audience. Now, why does this matter? That's the question at hand. What does this matter to our military families? Why does it matter to the Department of Defense? And why, I think most importantly, should it matter to you as service providers? From the outset, we know, just like most American families, our military families want or need to be dual income. They need to have that financial capacity. And that's what's been so fun about putting this together this year, is finding that connection between the financial aspects of our military families and then those needs, whether they're in spouse employment or any other area, and how those all tie together. So we know that military families represent America. As Josie said, I've been a military spouse for just under 24 years. And literally last weekend was my wife's final day on active duty after more than 30 years of service. 24, she was stuck with me. But it's amazing to see the challenges that our families encounter and the programs and resources, many of them led by you guys, that are there to support them. From a DoD perspective, we look at the retention of military families very, very seriously. We look at the recruitment of military members very seriously. And all of this plays into that. Some might say that we're in a little bit of a perfect storm, and anybody that knows what a perfect storm is know that it's a challenging time. And when we look at the recruitment across the military, outside of the Marine Corps, give the Marines the props where they get them, recruitment is down. Retention is down. A propensity to serve, young people thinking about the military is down. The eligible number of Americans is down. So many challenges that are all coming together right now. And as we think about the challenges that our nation faces, for more than 20 years, we were in a conflict with a lesser enemy. And that has really shaped how we've done business over the last 2+ decades. But as we look towards the future and we look towards our adversaries, it's a total change in the way we approach the deterrence of the US military because we are moving into conflict with near peer enemies. And that really is a difference in the way that we do business. So we know that when military spouses are employed and do not experience the challenges of employment over a period of time, not only is it going to be better for that military family, which leads to a higher level of retention, but they also may recommend military service to others. So that impacts the recruitment aspect. And of course, we know that when families have a higher level of economic satisfaction and economic security, that we are going to see a reduction in food insecurity. We're going to see those secondary and tertiary impacts. For us in the Department of Defense, we put a great deal of focus on military spouse employment as well as many other aspects of the military family readiness system. Because for us, it truly is a national security imperative that the military remains the strong deterrent that it has been, and we look towards the future to ensure that we have that strong deterrence moving forward.
So because, thinking of that lens of a national security imperative, I imagine that it's really important to then reduce the barriers for employment. So can you speak about what are the barriers for spouses in gainful employment?
Yeah, absolutely, Kayla. The number one, so we pull our data and inform our programs from the active duty spouse survey, as well as other data sets. And what we know from that survey is that spouses tell us, and the data underlies this, that the number one reason for spouse unemployment are frequent relocations due to military service. One of the things that we face as a military family, an active duty military family, is that we go according to the needs of the service. And so about 2 to 3 years, we can expect to move, or we say permanent change of station. That move disrupts many, many, many things. But in talking about spouse employment, it's definitely going to disrupt that continuity of employment. A move within the past 12 months more than doubles the chances that a military spouse is unemployed. That, you think about that, that seems, that tracks, right? But when we talk about a move every 2 to 3 years, the impact of that could be cumulative. And so that's why we're here talking today about how to mitigate. The second reason for spouse unemployment, a barrier to spouse employment, is the affordability of childcare. 38% of spouses with children use childcare during the day. They need that support. And moving to an area like San Diego, like the National Capital Region, like some of the places where we know childcare for everyone is expensive and difficult to find, means that military families, military spouses are going to be less likely to find employment due to the unavailability of childcare. And then finally, our spouses are professionals. Many of them have licenses that help them in their occupations. And when you move across state lines, you've got to move that license. And so 31% of our military spouses have had to secure a new professional license or credential after a move in order to continue employment. And so those are all aspects of barriers to spouse employment that we see in our work.
And I imagine too, sometimes for folks who are having to move that licensure, they don't have as much lead time to be able to get that licensure transferred over as compared to civilian families. So now we want to pause for a moment to hear from you all who are here with us today. So feel free to type something out. It doesn't have to be complete sentences, just your kind of quick thoughts in the chat pod. But thinking of our case story, the Howard family, what do you see as some specific challenges or barriers that Margaret might be facing in her goal of seeking employment? Reminder that she is a teacher. She's having some issues switching over her credentials. They're waiting on a wait list for childcare and those education services for Maya.
Kayla, I see great answers coming through in the chat. You guys are absolutely right. Childcare obviously is going to be an issue with her little one having some special needs as well. That's going to put a little additional pressure there, right, on finding a good quality, reliable childcare environment. The license as a teacher. I have a friend who's trained as a teacher because they said, hey, you can be a teacher anywhere. Not taking into account that there are different requirements in different states for that licensure. So that's definitely going to be an issue for her.
Yeah, I see another great point about not really having that sense of community yet for a backup plan for when childcare, even when childcare is attained, but it might fall through. You don't have those people that you can easily turn to when you need to get to work and have to rearrange your plans quickly. That can be an extra burden when you don't have that village to help you with that.
And I saw in there CB talked about no family or friends available for emergencies and backup. When as a military spouse and we PCSed our fair share and raising a child, the first thing you have to do to get childcare is list an emergency contact. Well, if you don't know anybody that you're going to trust to be that emergency contact, how hard is that? So it's like these simple things that are really not that simple. And then just think about just the disruption in family life. We talked about those kind of spouse employment barriers, but what about just that permanent change of station barrier, that relocation? Typically for the service member going into a new role, a new unit, new organization, they're going to be all in, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. That puts a burden on the spouse of getting the move taken care of, finding the new place, getting everything unpacked, all of those other aspects. And I'll tell you this, I know, and I say this all the time, as a military spouse, we're going to prioritize our family first, typically the service member second, the dog third, and we're fourth. And it's really easy when we are fourth priority for ourselves to keep moving our priorities to the right and making sure that everybody else is taken care of. And that really presents a huge challenge.
Eddie, I want to add one note to that before we move on, Kayla, which is my favorite piece of military spouse advice about emergency contacts that I ever got was a spouse that said when she lands in a new location and it asks for those 2 emergency contacts, she lists the local sheriff's department and the closest Methodist church. And she says between the 2 of them, they'll figure it out.
That's an amazing piece of advice. Thank you for sharing. Smart. So, in thinking of kind of our next trajectory of what we're going to talk about, can one of you speak to what policies and initiatives are important for us to know about when we're working with military spouses in this space?
Absolutely, Kayla. There has been a lot of really highly visible work done, particularly in the executive branch at the White House level, on working in particular when it comes to federal employment for military spouses. The goal is really to make the federal government the employer of choice for military spouses. As many of you know, it can be very difficult to break into federal employment. And military spouses happen to be typically in places where there usually are some federal positions just by nature of the installations they are on or near. And so couple of items that to bring your attention to. One is there was an executive order released in June of 2023 that really has a lot of action items for our federal government, but in particular is focused on reducing some of these barriers for military spouses and increasing the visibility of the availability of federal employment for military spouses. A lot of work going on within the federal government to make those proposals into action that continues today. One that happened earlier this year that just one small win was an effort to make it easier for our spouses who are currently employed in the federal government to take their jobs when they are deployed or when they are moved overseas with their military member. A program called Domestic DEDO. All of a sudden, I can't remember what it stands for. Domestic. Anyway, Eddie's going to come on and tell me what it is.
Domestic employees teleworking overseas.
And it just rolls off the tongue, right? So
Absolutely.
Not enough for you guys, sorry. Allowing those military spouses to work from overseas to keep those federal employment when relevant overseas, a great way to reduce one barrier to employment. Another option that military spouses have when it comes to federal hiring is the non-competitive appointment authority for military spouse hiring. That is government-wide, and it is an authority that allows a military spouse to be hired into a position. There are some requirements around there that we won't get into, but again, that is one path into federal government that is government-wide. For the Department of Defense, there is a military spouse preference program that allows the military spouse under certain conditions to have preference into positions when they apply for Department of Defense positions. So, right, the difference between those two, one, you can use in any government agency. The other is specific to DoD. Another thing that we've done and that our partners in the nonprofit sector have done is really try to educate employers writ large, not just the federal government, but all of our employers, particularly in the private sector, about the flexibilities that are necessary or that are helpful when looking to hire military spouses. You know, in a post-COVID world, some of this kind of makes sense, but it's something that we've been talking about in the spouse employment space for some time, right? The remote work, being able to work from your home for an employer in certain circumstances for certain job types. The ability to take time off during a PCS as part of the Military Spouse Employment Partnership, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Some of our partners are offering up to 2 weeks of paid time off for spouses who are undergoing one of those military moves, one of those PCSs. And then the ability to have flexible schedules, to work a little bit more one day, to work a little bit less another day, since the military spouse in the family unit is typically the primary parent, the primary caretaker in that family. There are also a lot of programs out there that support military spouses, military spouse employment. We work with them closely as part of our Spouse Ambassador Network program. But, you know, thinking of folks like you on the ground, our employment readiness folks, our program partners, Hiring Our Heroes, American Corporate Partners, many of the nonprofit folks working in this space are also working to educate employers on how they can adjust their policies to make them more military spouse friendly.
You know, Josie, I think one thing that stands out is that there are, you know, so many opportunities, let's call them, whether it's in the federal space, whether it's in the private sector, you know, hiring authorities, flexible schedules, all of these things that we see employers that are putting in place to support military spouses. But I think one of the things that we always have to remember is that there's not a silver bullet when it comes to spouse employment. There's not that one thing. And, you know, I think a lot of times we think about remote work. Well, if all military spouses could work remotely, then that would solve the problem. And we have to recognize that we have military spouses working across every industry sector, at every level from entry to the C-suite, you know, and sometimes that work is not going to be able to be done remote. We know since COVID, we've seen more and more opportunities for remote work, but it's not going to fit for every organization or every individual. And that's what's so awesome, that we have so many resources within the department. We're going to talk about those coming up here in just a couple seconds. But we also partner with those outside organizations, some of which Josie mentioned. But, there are so many organizations that are out there that are supporting military spouses specifically in their education and employment. And I think that's what all of you are part of. You're part of this system that we have of service providers across the military, across the government, across the nonprofit space that are looking for opportunities to support military spouses.
Thank you for that. Y'all been talking about this kind of at that higher meta level, right? Across the federal government, across the private sector. I'm wondering about the installation level. So, what supports are provided on installations for military spouses, education, and employment?
Absolutely. And many of those supports are on this webinar, which is really awesome because it's those individuals at the installation level, the boots on the ground that are interacting with military spouses on a daily basis. So at almost every installation in the world, and there's a handful that do not have this because of a remote and isolated or a really strange situation, but at almost every installation in the world, we have our employment readiness assistance programs. And they're basically very similar in what they do and how they support military spouses. They may have different names. You see those on the screen, but they're there to provide that local face-to-face support, and they do an amazing job of doing so. They are the connection to that local community. They are experts in resume development. They provide courses, one-on-one assistance. So, that's where that goodness is. But as Josie said, we're challenged sometimes in our military family life that we don't always take advantage of those face-to-face opportunities. My wife was a wing and installation commander at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And, being part of that command team introduced me to aspects and situations that I'd never really encountered. I worked and talked and met with a lot of military spouses and military families that lived 20 minutes away from Maxwell and had never been on Maxwell Air Force Base. And I say this all the time that if you're not taking advantage of the resources that we have at the installation level or other resources, the one thing I can guarantee you is that they won't help you. So if we don't have families going to installations and meeting with the employment readiness program or other resources on the installation, that installation is not able to support. And we all know that with our changing generations, that more and more people are looking for, virtual resources. They're on their phones, they're on their tablets, they're on their computers. And that's where they're looking for support and resources.
So even thinking of, that gap for folks who are living on installation or nearby, not aware or not utilizing those resources, makes me think of, the majority of military families don't live on installation. And especially for Guard and Reserve components, they might not even live in a state where there is an installation. So what resources out there exist for those folks?
Yeah, and that's really where the program that Josie and I work within in regards to the programs that are there. And I am going to turn this over to Josie.
Exactly. I mean, and this is our way of getting you into this, where we can talk about some of the things that we offer to help you serve the military spouse community, right? So the Spouse Education and Career Opportunities Program is your one-stop shop for virtual support for military spouse employment. Like Eddie said, 76% of our military families do not live on the installation. Just like, I was one of those families. I was at MacDill, not at Maxwell, but at MacDill Air Force Base, where because housing prices are such, we could not live, as close to the installation as we wanted. We lived there for 2 years, and I think I went on the installation 4 times over that period of time. And it was always because there was a ceremony that I was going to, right? Or I had to go to the ID card office. It was a 45-minute drive from my house. I wasn't stopping in to go to the Family Readiness Center. And so it was the target market for the SECO program. We are fully virtual. And that is purposely so we can meet that 70% of families and military spouses that live off the installation. We provide a full suite of career support to military spouses to help them through their journey. And it's military spouses not just looking to determine what their career will be, but it's for our military spouses who may have a little bit of experience, our spouses who maybe had one plan in mind and then married their service member and figured out they're going to need to change the plan. Okay, how do I translate what I did before into what I can do now? It's really focused on one-on-one support to spouses because we know every spouse brings a different story to the table. But it's really about helping that military spouse get started, helping them take the next step, helping them solve the problem of what do I do now that I'm in this military community.
So it sounds like there's a lot within SECO. So can you tell us a little bit more about SECO and briefly what does SECO do and how might the Howard family fit into the different things that SECO does?
Yeah, there are so many initiatives we have within the SECO program. And what's awesome is that I think that no matter what situation a military spouse is in, whether it's the Howards or whether it's another family, they're going to be able to find resources that are available for them. I saw a lot of comments in the chats about, folks not knowing what resources are out there. And that's why the MFRA is so important, because this is one of the methods, and we have many that we're going to talk about on how we disseminate information. But when we think of the SECO program, first I want to start with the SECO Career Center. So this is a call center operation, which means that no matter where a military spouse is, they're able to connect to the SECO Career Center. And through the Career Center, they're going to have the opportunity to work with career advisors and career coaches. Now, a career advisor has a 4-year degree and relevant certifications around education and employment, and a career coach has a master's degree and with the same certifications. What's really cool about this, first off, 100% virtual, anytime, any place. Second off, 100% free. Now, it's free to the spouse, but there's a huge investment by the department to put this operation together. And when you think about service providers that are out there, and I had the opportunity earlier this year to attend the Army's Employment Readiness Program training, and they had their employment readiness folks from all over the world that came together, and they helped me understand a little bit of the challenges that they face at the installation level. So if you think you're working with a military spouse, or you're working with any of your clients as an employment readiness professional, a good contact at a minimum is probably going to be 30 minutes, maybe an hour, where you're providing that one-on-one service, that one-on-one support to that individual. Now they're serving transitioning service members, military spouses, other adult family members, maybe, adult kids across the employment space. So now you think 30 to 60 minutes, how many good, strong contacts do you get in a day? On a good day, maybe 6, because you got all those other things. I know, I've been there. You got all those other collateral duties as well that you got to do. So on a good day, you're serving 6 people. Typically, you're maybe 4 to 5 people. There's not enough time in the day, in the week, the month, or the year to serve all of those. And that's why SECO is so important to be able to contact. Now, it's a contact center. And if you're like me, that's probably not the high point of your day to call a call center. Let me tell you a little bit about the SECO Career Center. 155,000 plus contacts in fiscal year 23. Of course, we're wrapping up 24, so we'll have updated data pretty soon, but 155,000 contacts between the Career Center and military spouses. 98% satisfaction rate. Unheard of. In fact, in 2022, the SECO Career Center was named the best global contact center by the International Customer Management Institute, which is the organization that sets the parameters for contact center operations. So that's a DoD, federal government delivered, best in the world. You can't beat that. So if you call in, what kind of support are you going to get? You saw some of the things that we do on the previous slide, but when we look at our career coaches, we've developed a number of curated packages specifically for career fields, industry sectors, and for challenges faced by military spouses. And you see many of those on the screen. It may be a spouse that's looking to break into the medical field or the education field or cyber technology, one of the highest growing fields there are. But it may be a new military spouse or a spouse that's looking to re-enter the workforce after raising a family. So when you work with a coach, they are your coach. We have spouses in the entrepreneurship space that have been working with their coach for more than 3 years. They build that action plan, they build that business plan, they check in every few weeks. And spouses tell us that one of the things they love is the fact that the coach is an accountability partner, that coach is there. So when we make it easy, I said it earlier, to slide our needs to the right, when I know that I've got a call coming up with my coach, I got to make sure that I get those things done. I get those steps done. So it's an amazing resource for military spouses to be able to leverage.
And thinking of support, I want to turn it back to the audience again for some thoughts from you all. We'll spend just a brief moment on this one, but how would you talk to and support Margaret in the experiences that she's having? So take a few quick moments to type out your thoughts here. And I had a quick thought while you were talking, Eddie, as well, about just the opportunities within SECO and regarding all the things that the Career Center provides. And it seems like there's some parallels with some of the things that the University Cooperative Extension system does in providing continuing education opportunities for things around, upskilling or providing additional certifications and things like best practices or innovative practices to really enhance that workforce. So it's cool to see how those parallels are working.
Absolutely. And I saw a great question in the chat as folks are putting things in there. But the question from Colleen, who can utilize the SECO resources? So SECO, and again, being a virtual operation, this is awesome. So active duty, National Guard, reserve spouses, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force. We cannot support Coast Guard unless they are activated under Navy orders, because they do fall under the Department of Homeland Security. But for Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force, they can take advantage of it. And a key aspect of SECO is that they can leverage all of the SECO resources up to 1 year after the separation or retirement of the service member. So we know a lot of times that separation or retirement occurs. Hey, it happened for me last week. And, now it may be the opportunity to take advantage of these SECO resources when you don't have that next PCS coming up.
Fantastic. And I see some great suggestions here in the chat. Maybe we can return back to them at the end. I'm going to keep it moving to make sure we get all the information covered in time. So moving from Career Center packages that SECO offers, what other initiatives do you have that can support spouses?
One of the programs that has had some great impacts for spouses is our My Career Advancement Account program. This is sometimes one that folks have heard of more than maybe our coaching packages or our Career Center, because it does come with $4,000 in financial assistance to eligible military spouses. These funds can be used for training, for licensing. It can be used toward an associate degree. It can also be used for college credit testing and continuing education. And so most people know the training, licensure, and associate degrees, but those last two of testing and college credit are really important. It's a way for you to level up if you've already taken some courses. It's a way for you, if you have a license, for you to get those continuing education credits. There is limited eligibility. Right now, eligibility is available for spouses of E1 to E6, O1 to O3, and W1 to W2. This was actually expanded in 2023 to those E6, O3, and W2 levels, which means that more spouses have been able to use it in the past couple of years, which is a great, great opportunity. So be sure you're telling your spouses about that, because of that expansion. It has been really beneficial to folks. And we do support our MyCAAs folks through the Career Center They sit down with a career coach. The career coach talks them through what their goals are. They make sure the schools that they're connecting with are right for the certification that they're looking for.
That's fantastic. So you've talked about, career expectations, career readiness, education, training, licenses. What about career connections? Where do those come in? How are we connecting spouses to employers?
Yeah, so our military spouse employment partnership is the place to be if you are an employer looking for military spouse talent, but don't know how to connect with that community. This program was started in 2011, and since that time, we've added more than 850 employer partners. Each one has put up their hand to say they are interested in recruiting, hiring, retaining, and promoting military spouse talent within their organizations. And these employers are in every sector. We have government contractors, we have staffing agencies, we have medical facility folks, we have big corporations like Amazon, T-Mobile, Walmart. We have Fortune 500 companies. In the past year or so, we added small businesses. We know small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And even though they might only be hiring a couple of spouses or folks a year, we want to facilitate them tapping into the military spouse talent that is out there so that our spouses can access every sector of the economy. And again, it's to make that connection between an employer and a military spouse. One of the things that I faced as a spouse is sometimes when you go in for that interview, you have to make that calculated decision. Am I going to be open and honest about my status as a military spouse? At this stage of my career, it's pretty obvious when you look at my resume. It looks like I'm jumping bail. But, if you're interviewing with one of our MSEP partners, you do not even have to think twice about that. These are people who want to know that you are a military spouse because they are looking for you.
I'm excited to see how many, what that number jumps up to within the next couple of years. And what are some initiatives that our service providers are referring spouses to?
This is great because when we look at these initiatives, I've seen people mentioning them in the chat pod already. So, there's awareness and being able to take these initiatives to spouses to let them know. So the first one is Udemy, which is an amazing online platform that you can utilize for upskilling and reskilling. And we provide military spouses with no cost access. So if you were using it yourself, you'd be paying a la carte. We give 1 year of full membership to Udemy Business, which has more than 5,000 courses, 35,000 hours of content. And we see spouses utilizing Udemy for, you name it, spouses pursuing their PMP or their Agile Scrum Development certification, spouses using it to upskill in, how to be a PowerPoint ranger or, using pivot tables and Excel. So across the gamut, there are opportunities through Udemy. Now we've got some other initiatives as well. The next one is called Flex Jobs. So we talked a little bit about remote employment. So Flex Jobs is an online jobs board that specializes in vetted remote opportunities. Once again, for spouses that are looking for remote work, we provide no cost access to Flex Jobs. Typically, there's a membership that that we are paying for so that spouses have access. And when I say these are vetted jobs, these are real jobs. These are not the jobs you see on your Facebook page at night that say, call me tomorrow and you'll make $3,500 next week. These are real vetted employment opportunities. And then finally, an initiative that launched in January of 2023 is the Military Spouse Career Accelerator. And the Career Accelerator is a competitive 12-week fellowship where the government, the DoD, is paying for military spouses while they are in the fellowship. So we're compensating military spouses in the fellowship. It's across industry sectors. It is competitive, but in the first year through 2023, we had more than 450 spouses participate, and 85% of them received employment offers from their host employers. So it's an amazing conversion rate of what we saw. And the industries are across the board in regards to the Career Accelerator. Really exciting. We're about 19 months into a 3-year pilot. And as we wrap up that 3-year pilot, so there's still opportunities to take advantage of this through 2025. But as we wrap that up, we'll have a lot of lessons learned to be able to apply for a program of record in the future. So really, really excited about the dividends and the outcomes we're seeing through the Career Accelerator.
You mentioned, that there's a sense of awareness about this, but I know a common theme of some comments has been about just the gap in knowledge and awareness of resources. So where can we find information about all of these resources and staying up to date on what's being offered?
Our MySeco website is, I like to call it our front door. Like, it's our office. We are a virtual program, so we don't have an office. You can't walk in my front door and see me. But you can go to the MySeco website and find everything that we've talked about today and so much more. The one thing that I'm going to flag for you before we move on to our next slide is the SECO resume builder and our MySeco profile. That is after the login for spouses, and it is an incredible way to get your spouse's information in front of employers. So in the first half of this year, our MSEP employer partners did 18,000 candidate searches of the MySeco profiles that we have on MySeco. They are looking for military spouse talent, and if the spouse has not completed that profile in MySeco, they were not found. You also have the ability to upload a resume and link to your LinkedIn. It's a great way to, I like to say, put your job search on autopilot and let those employers looking for military spouse talent come to you. We also have our jobs portal that has over 400,000 jobs from our MSEP partners. Again, these are jobs that are not specifically for only military spouses, but they are from employers who want to know about your military spouse talent because they are looking for you. You can also research occupations. We have a great scholarship finder on MySeco to help military spouses pursuing their education, find the resources for that. You've got our college scorecard. You can access those MyCAA benefits that we talked about prior, and so many articles on so many of the things that we've talked about today and that can help educate your conversations with spouses and help the spouses themselves. Another great way to stay up to date with all of the things going on in SECO is through our social platforms. Our social, we're quite proud of it. We've got a great team, and we have so many resources that are on those profiles on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. In particular, we have our MSEP Partner Connects. Those are live events where we bring an MSEP partner and introduce them to our community of followers on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and what have you. It's a great way to get their information in front of spouses and to remind spouses the diversity of employers that we have. We also have our SECO Spotlights, which are facilitated by our career coaches, where they come and they talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have in SECO. I think the next one coming up is talking about entry-level opportunities and how to find that entry-level opportunity. And so be on the lookout for that.
We're going to do a little bit of a lightning speed for these last couple ones to make sure we get through material. So real quickly, could you talk about when a military spouse is having a difficult time finding employment, what financial resources or assistance programs can provide temporary support?
Absolutely. So critical to this topic that we're here for. So one aspect is unemployment compensation. A lot of spouses do not realize that they may qualify for unemployment compensation. Now, it is going to vary from state to state in how much or what they qualify for. But as a spouse that relocates due to a permanent change of station, they can work within their state to access unemployment. Another great resource around licensure is that all of the military services provide up to $1,000 to cover relicensure expenses. So for spouses that are having to transfer their license, each service has a program to support that. They also have a program to support small business relocation. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you own or operate a small business, you can access up to $1,000 to support that transfer of your business from one location to another location. And then finally, legal support. And this is really important when it comes to overseas employment. We know that OCONUS, as we call it, overseas employment, is a challenge for military spouses of being able to secure work. There are limited opportunities, there's language barriers, there's local employment laws that impact a military spouse's ability to work in an overseas environment. So on the installation through the legal office, you are able to get expert advice on what you can or cannot do when it comes to working in an overseas environment. So that is the go-to resource for what's available there. I will say that you also need to have taxes in your mind if you're looking at working in an overseas location. And in that aspect, the legal office cannot provide tax advice, but we do have tax resources through Military OneSource, or you can consult with a tax advisor to make sure that you're on the up and up when it comes to taxation.
Right. We're going to skip over this last discussion point, but something perhaps just to ponder internally about how you might incorporate some of these resources. We're going to jump to our last content slide, which is asking about, when we're thinking about licensing reciprocity, what progress has been made.
There has been a ton, and again, it's been great to see because everybody's been talking about it in the chat pod, the SCRA and all of these things that are in place. So there's a few different aspects. So from a federal law perspective, and again, most spouses don't know this, states have to accommodate licensure transfer for military spouses. That is federal law. And then when we look at compacts, there are licensure compacts across multiple areas that the department is working with those compact bodies. And what a compact means, it's an agreement between states or multiple states to transfer a license. That might be for massage therapy. It might be in the healthcare industry, in many other spaces. Compacts to continue to grow, but they're also very critical and something that we continue to develop and work on. So there's work being done across various aspects. If you have questions regarding the SCRA, which is that federal law, we have resources on Military OneSource and MySeco so that you can better understand how that impacts.
Great. It'd be awesome to see that whole map lit up in green one day. All right, well, we unfortunately are out of time for questions, but we want to make sure that your questions do get addressed. So please feel free to continue to drop those in the chat pod and we can follow up with you afterwards. I have a list of the documents of all those questions with answers. If there are other questions you have about the spouse employment space, we can follow up perhaps with additional blogs and webinars answering some of those questions. So please continue to feel free to drop those in the chat. Sorry, we were out of time. I'm going to turn it over to Kim to wrap us up. Thanks all.
A very special thank you to our presenters today, and thank you for joining today's session as part of the Economic Readiness and Military Family Wellbeing Series. We value your feedback on your experience participating in the 2024 Military Family Readiness Academy. In early October, you will receive an invitation and chance to respond to the 2024 MFRA in a survey via the email you registered with for this event. We would greatly appreciate your response to that survey. Your feedback will help us continue to improve your academy experience. Today's webinar offers one continuing education credit from a number of different organizations, as well as a certificate of attendance. To receive either of these items, you will need to complete a two-step process that includes an evaluation and a follow-up survey, depending on the type of CE you require. To access continuing education opportunities or a certificate of attendance, you can follow the direct link to the evaluation, which has just been shared in the chat pod. If you prefer to access this later, please navigate to the webinar event page for today's session and click the purple Continuing Education button, similar to the one you see pictured here on the slide. First, you must complete an evaluation. After that, you'll see a message where you can select the link for the continuing education credit type you prefer. Then you will be directed to another survey or post-test. After successfully completing the second step, a certificate will automatically be emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours to the email address you provided. Please note that some agencies and organizations may have stronger spam filters, so be sure to check your junk folder. For questions regarding continuing education, please email ce@oneop.org. Mark your calendar for the next Academy webinar coming up on September 24th, Enhancing Military Family Well-Being, Understanding and Nurturing Economic Security. This webinar will discuss factors that can impact economic security and how these factors relate to health and wellness. You can register for this session at the link in the chat pod. We also invite you to join our next event on Tuesday, October 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, entitled Empowering Military Spouses to Maintain Employment, a review of the resources for holistic support. This webinar will explore various recruitment and retention programs, focusing on how they address the multiple barriers faced by military spouses in maintaining employment. Continuing education credits and certificates will be available for participants. You can RSVP now on the OneOp webinar event page. Be sure to visit us at our website, oneop.org, to explore upcoming events, articles, resources, and more. You can also find us on Facebook, X platform, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will stick around for just a minute or two for those who wish to grab any links or information from the chat. We thank you all again for attending and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.